Welcome everyone to this exciting panel focused on early stage innovation in academia and industry settings. We have a wonderful cadre of experts today with us, and I will co-moderate with my colleague Meredith Fisher. Let us start by quick introductions. My name is Michal Preminger. I head Johnson & Johnson Innovation in East North America. And I'll turn it over to Meredith to introduce herself.
Sure, terrific. So thanks, Michal. Looking forward to hosting this panel, and thanks to the panelists for joining us. My name is Meredith Fisher. I'm a partner at the Mass General Brigham Ventures Fund. We are the VC arm of Mass General Brigham Ventures, which is the largest group of academic medical research hospitals affiliated with Harvard Medical School. Michal, would you like us to then ask our panelists to introduce themselves?
Yes, let's go around. Maybe I'll start with Kate, and then Erica, Kuldeep, Andrew, and Ryan. That will be, I think, a good order as I see it on the Zoom matrix. So, Kate.
Hi, thanks to the hosts and to you both as moderators today. I'm really excited to join the conversation. So my name is Kate Strayer-Benton, and I lead business development for the Innovation Office at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute in Boston. Innovation at Dana-Farber encompasses all the tech transfer functions of the Institute. And among other things, our BD team works to identify new strategic collaboration opportunities and optimizing our existing alliances. We develop novel funding strategies for early stage oncology research and support the commercialization strategies for the incredible work coming out of the labs at Dana-Farber. I'm looking forward to sharing some of our exciting advancements with you today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kate, for joining us. Erica.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Erica Bolzman, and I'm a senior scientist within the Oncology Scientific Innovation Team within Janssen Oncology, the pharmaceutical company of Johnson & Johnson. I recently transitioned to this role earlier this year, and it uniquely positions me to use my past scientific expertise to effectively and efficiently scout and evaluate innovative technologies, whether it's assets, platforms, or anything in between. I basically work with our BD team, our innovation centers from coast to coast, as well as globally, to really work with external innovators and to move our internal oncology pipeline forward. Looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you. Andrew.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me participate with this illustrious group. I'm a general partner at Health Innovation Capital. We are a fund that focuses exclusively on the unmet medical needs for pediatric patients across the entire care continuum in their journey in the areas of oncology, infectious diseases, and rare and orphan designations. Fund was started in May of 2020, and I think one of the unique components besides being a venture capital impact fund is that one of our core tenets of our investment thesis is we actually donate 10% of our general partner carry back to 30 centers of excellence that we work with throughout the United States and globally. Is one of those institutions, as is Hadassah Hospital in Israel. So pleasure to be with you all.
Thank you, Andrew, for joining. Kuldeep, you're next, long-time member of this panel and former moderator.
Hey, Kuldeep.
I don't know if, yeah, it doesn't look like you're mute, but we can't hear you. No, we can't hear you. Maybe we'll go to Ryan and come back to you, Kuldeep. Ryan.
Sure. I'm Ryan Schoenfeld. I'm the CEO of the Mark Foundation for Cancer Research. The Mark Foundation is a cancer research nonprofit based in New York, and our mission is to accelerate research that will transform prevention, diagnosis, and treatment of cancer. And really, we look to fund the best science that will have the biggest impact. We do that both through making grants and through investing. So we've been around for about 5 years, and to date, we've given out around $160 million in research grants to individuals, to large teams, to companies, mostly to universities. And then we've also, we have a growing portfolio of venture investments, all aligned with our mission in the cancer space. And they run from seed stage through Series A, B. And sometimes we will invest in companies that spin out of our grants using IP that was developed with our grant funding, but our investment portfolio is not limited to that. We also, we have a full-time venture investments principal, and we will invest, in any cancer research mission aligned venture that we feel is really poised to make an impact, in the same way we feel about our grant. So that's going to ultimately help bring new treatments and diagnostics to patients.
Thank you. Kuldeep, are you?
Yes, my apologies. I think I have everything set up correctly. My name is Kuldeep Neote, and my current role is an entrepreneurial in residence, an EIR, with the Ontario Institute of Cancer Research, OICR, which is based in Boston. And specifically, I work in the for-profit arm of OICR, which is called FACIT. And my role really there is to leverage the discoveries that are made at OICR and then pursue a commercial path forward with those discoveries, in particular to spin out companies, to start up newcos in a very collaborative manner with the academic community in the greater University of Toronto and the Toronto area. In addition to my EIR role at the OICR, I also have a non-oncology related EIR role at the NIH, and I do some consultations with biotech companies, in particular oncology and immuno-oncology companies. I bring with me a wealth of experience. I've been in the pharmaceutical industry for over 25 plus years. Worked in the areas of inflammation, oncology, immunology, but really focused on external innovation for the last 5 or 6 years in big pharma. So previously I was in the buy side, and now I'm really in the create innovation, venture, and sell side. So I look forward to the discussion with all the panelists here.
Oh, yeah, I think you forgot me there in terms of intros.
Yeah, oh, sorry.
Yes, so you may have not seen me. So my name's Anton Xavier. I'm the director for early stage life science banking at Silicon Valley Bank. We work with very incredibly early stage companies in the life sciences space across all verticals, particularly therapeutics, from $0 in the bank all the way up to Series A. We, and in my division, help specifically with non-banking products. So essentially helping these companies get to that Series A through connections with investors or through unique insights that we might have. I come from a large pharma background in R&D all the way up to clin dev, as well as search and evaluation, particularly in an immuno-oncology and targeted oncology. Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. Maybe I'll just thank all of you, not only for being here, but also for doing what you do. I mean, we have here the diversity of activities from supporting innovators in academia and as they come out of academia and along the value chain with such diverse tools and set of experiences and vantage points. And I think we're lucky to have the opportunity to hear from all of you today. So maybe I'll turn to you, Meredith, to kick off the panel here, the discussion.
Yeah, terrific. So I think, Michal, we talked about starting with a speed round, which I always really like. One, because it puts people immediately on their toes. And two, because I think it actually provides great fodder for follow-up for the moderator. So it makes our job even a little easier for that. So what I'd love to do is, especially as you said, describing how we have such a diverse group here with so many different perspectives, but really also uniquely suited to think about immunotherapies and oncology. And so I'd love to do a speed round to say, what are the things that you're seeing and most excited about right now in what's going on in this space? And so maybe just in reverse order, Anton, since you were last, I'm going to shamelessly put you back in the hot seat first. But then what I'll do, actually just to mix it up a little bit, is I'll let you call on the next person to answer the speed round. So you get a little bit more control on that as well, just for just for something fun to mix it up a little bit. So hopefully Hopefully I've talked enough to give you some time to think about what your answer is going to be. And now over to you.
Well, okay, thank you, Meredith. I'll try and make this a speed round and not a slow round. Let's think. So in terms of the exciting data that's coming from the late stage, and then we can go into early stage and emerging science where we think we should go. CAR-Ts and CAR-NKs, some of the data coming out of Claudin targeted CAR-Ts and solid tumors it seems to be astounding. CAR-NKs and the work from Carter in liquid tumors has certainly been incredibly interesting. However, what we need to understand about immuno-oncology is it's really one frame of a larger aspect of cancer. Cancer is a heterogeneous disease, and you can't just look at immunology as being the only aspect of cancer itself. Where I like to see everything going and where things seem to be going is around the kind of personalized approach to targeting cancer. And I can give an example of some of the early academic work done by Rosenberg, where he was targeting KRAS G12D in colorectal cancer with a very specific HLA type, C802, I believe, very rare form of HLA. But got complete remission in some cancer patients with some resistance, and I can touch upon that resistance. But then you can see the scaling of that technology to date to companies such as Affinity, where they're targeting G12D, preclinical right now, but affinity maturized T cells with a T cell, a novel T cell that's been affinity maturized. Targeting again G12D. The issue there, though, is the affinity maturation of T cell receptors. We've seen in the past how that's gone down with Adaptimmune and Titin cardiotoxicity. So we would have to look for how effective these therapeutics are. But really speaking, if you look at what can combine with immuno-oncology, and I think that's the next stage, this kind of G12D approach, G12C approach of targeting these oncogenic drivers, which affinity is going down, seems to be the right approach. However, affinity does limit its population to certain HLA types. So small molecules in that space, such as Amgen, Novartis, and Mirati, who are going after small molecules targeting G12C as well as G12D, could have a large impact in cold tumors, where you can't really get a true cell penetration into, say, large cancers such as pancreas tumor, where G12D is incredible. Is an incredible market. What I would like to see where everything's going is these kinds of small molecules targeting these oncogenic drivers, and in combination with other checkpoint inhibitors as well as chemotherapy, that might be the ideal way to go. So I'll stop there. There's a lot more I can say, but don't want to run my mouth, and I'm going to pick someone now, which is so good for me. And I'm looking at either Ryan and Kuldeep because I really want to slam them. I'll go with Kuldeep because I've known him for many years in pharma, and he's probably got a lot to say.
Thanks, Anton. I knew you would pick on me. So I think. It'd be remiss to not mention the approval of the LAG-3 antibody. I think it's fair to say it's taken a long time since really the hype that, immune checkpoint targets were really going to come one after the other. And I think it's fair to say it was in some ways very challenging to really get, another immune checkpoint blockade approved. And the approval of the LAG-3 antibody in the metastatic melanoma disease was I think finally, I think it can happen. We can really make it happen. But it is in combination with Nivo. So it'll be very interesting to see how the standard of care in the metastatic setting really evolves now that we have CTLA-4 and we have LAG-3. I do want to say, I mean, I appreciate, Meredith, that your question was, what are the exciting new areas? I think what we don't talk about really are some of the failures, but more importantly, what are the failures teaching us, and in which new directions we need to go. Nektar's failure of their IL-2 based therapy, I think, was a bit of a disappointment, and really that had a pretty negative implication. But I think what we forget is what we learned from those clinical trials, and how there is a slew of IL-2 based therapies that I think are coming second generation, and we don't have to dwell into the details of that, but we've learned a lot in terms of toxicity and how to manage it, and how you really have to engineer the IL-2 to really get the type of efficacy that we think we need to have. The other disappointing one again was TIGIT. I think there was a lot of hope that the TIGIT antibody would be yet another immune checkpoint inhibitor that would really make it. And I think the clinical data there again has been disappointing. And I think this just speaks to what I observed at the AACR on the complexity of the tumor microenvironment, and how cutting edge technologies are really trying to give us a perspective. And I think the single cell and next-gen RNA-seq and whole exon sequencing is really trying to provide us with some insights into how complex it is, but we're still just scratching the surface. I think we really need to understand what is the immune status of a tumor as it progresses. And it's a very different disease. And there were some very interesting examples of how GBM really is a completely different disease. When the secondary tumors really come up once the primary tumor has been resected. So I think this is an interesting emerging areas to really watch. And I won't dwell, Anton, on what you mentioned in terms of the NK-based CARs that I think is really going to hopefully change. And we hope that we're going to see the type of durability that we see with CAR Ts that we're seeing with NKs. So I'll stop over here, and I don't know, Meredith, if I get to pick who the next person is, and
you do.
And of course I do. Okay, and not surprisingly, Ryan, it's been a while since I've heard from you, so it'll be great to have your insights on what the speed round is here. Oops, Ryan is on mute, right? Yeah.
Now I'm on mute. There we go. How's that? Yeah, you guys can hear me? Good. Okay, so thanks Kuldeep, and thanks Anton for starting off with a couple of areas. I completely agree with the areas you guys covered, and especially Kuldeep, it's really good to bring up some of the areas we might be able to learn from, right? That are failures before we just move away from them. So the thing that the area that I've been excited about lately in the immuno-oncology space is, combinations, right? But new combinations, especially looking at the intersection of therapeutics that are targeting, the DNA damage response pathways and replicative stress based targets. And there's a lot of excitement. Those have been around for a while now. There's monotherapy potential there. But what's exciting is the potential for intersection of that with IO therapy, that that some of these, intervening in some of these pathways seems to lead to immunogenic cell death in ways that I think we're still trying to understand, but there seems like there's a lot of potential clinically for these, DDR modulating targets in combination with checkpoints. So I think there's going to be a lot of new mechanistic biology to uncover there to understand what's going on, and maybe find new targets and new pathways that could also lead to immunogenic cell death in good combinations with other checkpoint inhibitors. But also I think it's very exciting what's happening now clinically. There's some combination studies that are that are happening that are very exciting, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how those play out and what we can learn from them. And then things that we can, and Kuldeep, so your thoughts about some recent disappointments and what we can learn from them. That got me thinking about an even a disappointment from a few years ago. But in the metabolic space, right, in IO, looking at obviously there was a big movement away from IDO inhibitors at the time based on a disappointment around a key trial, and I think there's probably some room to go back to there, not to necessarily go back in the same way, but there are some learnings that may have been left on the table or underdeveloped, let's say, that we could learn from that around how metabolism and the immune system kind of interact, and what are some better opportunities to target things more precisely or target pathways differently that might be worth revisiting. So I'm excited about that too. And so now I get to think. So I'd like to hear from Erica, who I've just met for the first time today, and so I'd love to meet you and hear what you have to say about this too.
Right, thank you so much, Ryan. I would be remiss if we didn't, and Anton mentioned, about CAR Ts overall, and I'm most excited about the overall advancements, and not only looking at T and NK cells, but looking at other immune cells as well, whether it's macrophages, other monocytes, et cetera. And, some of the preclinical and early work looking at in vivo CAR T generation, and really trying to get around, some of the manufacturing and cost, issues that are commonly associated with our approved CAR T technologies, and, really tapping into innovative strategies with gene editing platforms and technologies to really see about generating these CAR Ts in situ. I think that's a pretty exciting area. It was also mentioned earlier about, specific small molecule targeting of, various mutant, derivatives of various oncogenic drivers, for instance, KRAS or PI3 kinase, alpha mutants. I think the integration of data science, whether it's artificial intelligence, machine learning, in the drug discovery phases of many of these oncology, driven technologies is really important, as far as enabling high throughput screenings to potentially, discover allosteric, binding pockets, and all of that, moving the field forward in a lot of new and exciting ways. So bringing together, a more interdisciplinary approach, I think is very important as we move things forward within this field. So, Michal, I see you speaking, but you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to entice you to maybe mention, and I know we're not as advanced in this area as in others, but I was tempted to invite you to make any comments about using energy and maybe technology or medical technology, or any emerging signs that combining energy with a pharmacological approach could be interesting. I mean, you don't have to, but if you want to.
I didn't quite follow what you were asking. I'm sorry. It was breaking up a little bit on my end.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to make the mention, maybe I won't pick on you, but I was just going to mention that it seems that there are multiple attempts to explore whether use of energy, whether it's radiation or new approaches, and combining them with what we now consider more traditional immuno-oncology approaches, if we can talk about more traditional, is emerging as another area that is quite interesting. And I was going to pick on you just because of the nature of Johnson & Johnson as a company that has both sectors.
Yeah, that's a great point, Michal. And essentially, we've within oncology are looking at new and innovative strategies to cross the blood-brain barrier, for instance, for GBM or secondary metastasis associated with breast cancer and lung cancer, and looking at things that are more advanced in the clinic using, for instance, focused ultrasound, to open, the blood-brain barrier to allow, not only small molecules, but in the hopes of, allowing for large molecules, and other, therapeutics to cross the blood-brain barrier to increase the overall efficacy. So it's a lot of exciting things going on within that space. And in my current role, it really allows me to really see what all is out there and really be able to discern, what is most innovative within the space. But truly excited about what's going on across oncology. So I'll pick on Kate now.
Great, thanks. It's always hard to go last, but I guess second to last, I still get a little bit of flex here. I think I love these speed rounds. I think it's always hard to narrow it down to one example, and that's proven by all of us giving a few. I think last year my answer to this question had to do with RNA, and that's certainly still a hot topic with an increased emphasis on the value of mRNA as a tool in cancer treatment. So I think that's just something we still see a lot of interest in and hear a lot about. I think as Anton and others highlighted, there's certainly still considerable emphasis on cell therapy with the increasing focus on other cell types. NK cells have been mentioned, macrophages, gamma delta T cells, and other cells. I think engineered NK cells have certainly gotten a lot of attention, and you've got the clinical advancement from companies like Fate and CARTA, leading to, I'd say a cautious optimism around this next generation of cell therapies with the potential to overcome many of the manufacturing and the logistical challenges associated with autologous CAR T cells. I think the NK cell biology has been a hot area for a number of reasons, and we've definitely witnessed a increase in interest, both internally, with what our faculty are working on, as well as externally, what people are coming to us looking for in terms of NK cells, NK-mediated checkpoint targets, NK cell-mediated tumor immunity, as there's still a clear need to better understand the mechanisms underlying the regulation of NK cells and the function within the tumor environment. So I think we're going to continue to see as things advance in the clinic, we're still going to continue to see some more of this work at the earlier stages. And then maybe the last thing that I haven't heard, I could echo a lot of the other technologies people have mentioned, but there's an increasing emphasis on earlier detection and diagnosis and technologies that enable this. And I think that's an area that Dana-Farber is very passionate about. And we're finding that I think there's also starting to be more capital flow in that direction as well. And so I think it's going to be an area to watch in the coming years and think about where our technologies are best positioned for success there. So that's my hot take. So let me hand it over to Andrew to wrap up this speed round.
Great. Well, it's difficult for me to add anything to what the illustrious group said, because I think you've all touched upon a myriad of different opportunities. But I tend to focus things kind of on the back end, thinking about commercialization of that innovation itself. I've been studying cell and gene therapy for a long time. I was in Leroy Hood's lab at one point when I was at Cleveland Clinic. So, the maturation of cell and gene therapy and the iterations that we're seeing now are quite frankly extraordinary from where my career started. But early detection and diagnosis, to me, as going back to something Kate had ended with, I think is a seminal event. I last week was meeting with the chief medical officer for a very large private payer, who was articulating to me that roughly about 1,100 opportunities are in phase 1 that have one or another application in IO, and they're going to cover 4 out of 1,100. So for me, it is as important to know what features are important as it is what features are not important. And I think one of the critical points that has evolved over time is data and the intersection of the acquisition of that data, and then the intersection of data management, whether it be digital technology, digital health, and sciences of that data and how it influences clinical trial design and implementation. The other thing that I think is equally compelling is the use of non-pediatric focused research, dovetailing that now into pediatrics itself. It's kind of hard for us to imagine that by 2030, that 40% of the world's population is going to be under the age of 25, and yet less than 10% of all healthcare R&D goes into pediatrics. So it is a challenge. But one of the things that we're very excited about is the amount of funding and the amount of innovation that's been taking place, novel innovation that has been taking place in pediatric oncology. One area someone had mentioned about innovation in crossing the blood-brain barrier and looking at glioblastomas. Pediatric glioblastoma, I think we can all agree, is an indication that it needs to be eradicated yesterday. It's amazing that every year that passes by, another 4 or 5 100 children pass away from this disease while things are still in research. So I'm very excited to see how the FDA has kind of championed new innovation and has been a little bit more, shall I say, open-minded about accelerating the review process for some of those things so that patients can gain near-term access to some of that innovation that you all referred to. So hopefully that helps a little bit.
Yeah. That actually serves as a perfect segue into thinking about how we innovate in the way in which we fund and support and nurture all this emerging innovation that you all have mentioned and that goes beyond that. So I would love to hear from you what you see out there in terms of new or continued development of early stage innovation funding and incubation and nurturing in academia and outside of academia across geographies. Maybe we'll start with our middle group this time. We'll start with you, maybe Kate, representing a very innovative institution, and we'll let you pick in some reverse order later.
Sure. So I think we've talked about this before, but at Dana-Farber, we've been looking for ways to further advance and de-risk programs internally before licensing or spinning them out. And that's really in an effort to derive greater value, which we can then continue to funnel into our earlier stage research. And to do this, you're looking for ways to increase access to and funding for some of these kind of killer experiments that our investigators need to do to further de-risk what we consider to be highly commercializable technologies before taking them outside the walls of the Institute. But I think to do this effectively, it really requires new ways of thinking about funding, and it really is increasing the demand for unencumbered funds. And so we're finding that that's a conversation we're having a lot is, what are some of the sources of funding? And, grants have been a great source of funding in the past, but we're finding that there's, with a lot of nonprofits now, they're asking for more in return than they had been in the past. And there's often, IP considerations and stuff that we previously didn't consider with some of those types of funding. I think, externally, we're seeing VCs de-risking technologies for seed investment via sponsored research or like a pre-seed virtual NewCo. And I think this is part of the model that Deerfield has adopted and expanded across, I think it's something like 20 academic institutions right now, one of which is Dana-Farber. And we're also seeing major academic medical centers and cancer centers in particular launching corporate venture arms. So you've got MD Anderson that has their Focus Fund, and Dana-Farber recently launched Binney Street Capital. And I think these funds are really an important avenue to capitalize on opportunities for early stage investments in this area that previously, academic centers haven't participated in. And I think Meredith could go on about the value of these types of funds from her experience as well. But I think that's another area that we're constantly watching the evolution of. So I will pass it back. I think Erica passed to me last time, so I'll give it back to her.
All right, thank you, Kate. No, I think that, with me recently transitioning to this role and really, finally understanding, from the external innovative perspective, what is all needed to bring these external assets in. I've been working internally, here at Janssen for the past 6 years. So I'm really excited to learn more about, all of these different investment opportunities, but working closely with our colleagues within what is called JJDC, our strategic venture arm at Johnson & Johnson. We work closely with our individual partners, to truly partner with them. And we find that a lot of earlier stage and academic institutions is truly where the innovation lies. So we work closely with them in order to, draft a potential, collaboration or investment opportunity that would benefit us both. And I think that moving in that sort of framework, instead of just throwing money, at these various institutions, et cetera, but really, creating a true partnership with them. And for J&J, it's always driven by the science. We really look closely early and try to, differentiate, within these, highly competitive spaces, really trying to understand what differentiates one technology or one approach from another, and really seeking not only to invest in the science, but also to invest in the team of scientists that are moving everything forward. And I know that we have a host of excellent opportunities with academic institutions as well as, early stage assets. And I think that that's really where the innovation lies. So really trying to work on, cultivating a relationship with our future partners. I think that is an intangible piece of this puzzle as we think about funding and investing within this space. So I will pass it on to Ryan.
Thanks, Erica. So, at the Mark Foundation, we're really, if our mission is to accelerate therapies and diagnostics, to reach patients. And so one of the things one of our founding kind of principles almost when we started 5 years ago was the, this knowledge that a lot of innovation gets stuck or stalled when it's still in the academic stages. And we're not unique in this. This is not in this perspective, right? Lots of other, in pharma and in VC in particular, and I spent most of my career in pharma, and so we did spend a lot of time looking at projects we would look to partner on or license in from academia. And I certainly have spoken with and we've connected with a lot of folks in the venture capital world as well, and try to understand, such as folks at Deerfield, how their approach to enabling academic research works. And so we think those are all great. So we're looking for areas to be impactful so we can kind of fund research in a way that's not really already covered. So one thing the Mark Foundation tries to do is to be nimble and to identify those opportunities. And from our perspective, we still see, as much as VC and pharma have over the last 10 years and even 5 years in particular, really increased their engagement with academic innovation. We feel like there are still projects for a variety of reasons in cancer research that still get stalled or stopped altogether. They may not align with certain strategic priorities. They may represent the wrong type of risk or too much risk at a given time. They may, there's all kinds of decision trees that are followed, right? I think by these organizations when they're looking for they're all trying to compete with each other to find the academic projects, but they're also can be rigid sometimes about which projects are in or out. So we're looking for, we have a different profile for risk, right? We're looking to fund just really exciting science that has a potential that we can learn something from it, even if it doesn't work out. So if it does work out, that's great, and we hope to partner with the scientists and the entrepreneurs downstream through investment, through our venture arm where we have an opportunity to invest. But even there, we don't really put it with heavy strings attached. It's just it's a non-exclusive kind of arrangement where we'll offer to invest. But if that's covered by others, that's fine with us. We're just happy to see things move forward. And we're really just looking for trying to find that innovative, use a cliche, but it's still kind of true, the high risk, high reward research that's stuck. It's not, being, for whatever reason, doesn't fit the risk profiles of other organizations. And we'll try to find that innovative research, try to catalyze it, give it a spark, try to encourage others. If it works out, if it looks well, other people will get into the pool and we'll, be part of a syndicate that, that can, help move things forward from there. So that's been our approach, and I think it's working, and we're looking to grow that approach as well. There's a lot of appetite for more projects in this space in our drug discovery kinds of grants, for example.
Maybe as we go around, let me just throw in another element in this question. Just thinking about the evolution of the field. I mean, we're now, on the one hand, we see more mature products coming to market, getting approved. On the other end, there's kind of unprecedented wave of additional opportunities. Does that impact at all this early stage innovation model as you're responding? And sorry, Ryan, I kind of didn't give you a chance to choose the next person. Maybe we'll be flexible here a little bit.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I think I wrapped up. Maybe it's better if we pass it. I will pass the baton to Kuldeep, and then we can start with just so I don't chew up too much time here. I think we're running short. Thanks.
Thanks, Ryan. Let me just first quickly say I want to agree with what Kate mentioned. I think being in an academic setting and really having enough pre-seed funding to really firm up an opportunity or a discovery that really has a commercial path forward is really important. And that's what really attracted me to the role at the OICR FACIT, is that there's the prospect of getting grants up to 500,000 that really allows you to firm up the IP. But I think what's really interesting is it gives you the opportunity in an academic environment to infuse, for example, targeted therapies where you can bring in multi-omic approaches to really identifying what patient populations could benefit from a particular therapy. I think doing that in isolation is really what is almost set for failure. When you don't use the current emerging areas of technologies to really tailor a potential approach to developing therapeutic becomes very, very, very important. And I still like that of having a very staged approach to funding that really grows a particular opportunity into a seed round versus a Series A round. And this is actually very contrary, and maybe we can now shift the discussion to, I think we've been spoiled before the pandemic and even during the early part and mid stage of the pandemic, where there was such an access of capital in the market, where it was not unheard of in providing, a huge Series A upwards of 100, if not even 200 million to really fund, biotechs. And I think finally now we're coming to the point where that, I'm not going to say the bubble has burst, but we are at a pretty severe downturn where you don't really see that happening. And I hope this is a sign where actual innovation that really has legs to move forward is what is going to hopefully get traction. And I'd love to hear other panelists, talk about the current situation. I know it's a very challenging time to raise capital. And are we going to be in a point where we can turn this around? And let me just give one last example before I perhaps give Andrew the opportunity or Anton the opportunity. I think of Harpoon Therapeutics as an example. They have a very interesting T-cell engager technology platform. They very recently, had a deal that they announced with Roche Genentech to pursue, I believe, HER2 T-cell engager. But if you actually look at the company as whole and their technology platform, they are in what's called a negative enterprise value, meaning that their market cap value is actually lower than than the cash that they have on hand. And Andrew is shaking his head, and I'd love to hear his opinion of how this is really going to impact this field. Is it going to be truly a negative? But hopefully, there's going to be things that are going to turn it around. I look at a company like Harpoon, and I hope that the company will indeed survive, like other companies that are in this negative enterprise value. So, what are your thoughts, Andrew, on this?
Well, no, I mean, I wish Harpoon was the only example like that. And that's the problem. I want to touch upon a couple of things. One that you said, Kuldeep, and then going back to something Kate said about how to de-risk opportunities. I think one of the differences between our firm and the rest of you all is that our LPs are very, very different. In some cases, you have one LP, and for us, we have a multitude of LPs. So we have to provide an upper quartile return on investment, and hopefully, as a part of our impact strategy, drive commercial innovation. And like Erica said, we are driven by the science as well. And I think everybody would say that that is at the foundation of why they do what they do. If they weren't intrigued with science, they probably should do something else in this field, because I've become very old over the last 25 years. But the interesting thing is that I'm not from Boston originally. I'm from a small town in Southern Ohio, but I moved to Boston about 10 years ago. And I've been in venture capital now for almost 20 years. And I have to admit that one of the things that has been incredibly disheartening, and I would say not just disheartening, but very frustrating, is how the evolution of Boston's venture capital community has taken hold. This idea of sponsored research, enrolling it into a venture fund, putting your own management team around it, and driving it to the public market and getting public before it has actually de-risked its model. When I started my investment banking career, I would have been thrown out the window of Park Avenue if I had thought about taking something that was preclinical to market. Preclinical is going IPO now. I don't even understand this. And the thing that what is interesting for me is that we're talking about valuations and how the capital is dried up. And to be honest with you, and I know this is going to put targets all over me if this goes public, but I really do believe this, is it's about time that the valuations have come back. Because quite frankly, the valuations were out of control. The risk that funds and corporations like you all were being asked to assume, given the inherent risk that these opportunities still have baked into their model, was embarrassing. And yet my industry was lining up, throwing money at people irrespective of the valuations. And that to me was a harpoon to my heart to go back to Harpoon, for example. And so what I'm very excited about, quite frankly, is that I am glad that there's a correction in the market so that valuations are appropriately structured. Yes, it is an incredibly difficult time to raise capital. But why is it a difficult time to raise capital? Because now, instead of just throwing money at anything, we get the opportunity to ask, does this work? Prove it to me. Show me the data. Show me the collaborations that you have. Show me how you're going to get forward. Show me how this is ultimately going to get to the bedside. Because if you can't, no problem. I've got 480 opportunities pounding at my door to get funded. And I'm excited about that because I can certainly tell you 12 months ago, I'd go in for somebody and somebody would tell me that they had a pre-money valuation of $150 million and they were still doing preclinical studies. And they were telling me that we are getting a discount at that price, which caused me almost to, have an aneurysm. And so I say to you all, this is a challenging time, but it's a good time for us because now we can get back to the things we love, asking the questions about what makes this science great. That's at least my opinion.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrew. We'll take it to you, Anton. You have a variety of things to either respond to or open up for additional consideration.
I'm glad Andrew said what he said and not me. So that was great. Preclinical companies going IPO through SPAC and now turning into potential zombie companies, and maybe this is the year to reverse merger. Who knows? But this is not an ideal scenario to have in 2021 going into 2022. You're absolutely correct. This is not what we want to be seeing. We need science. We don't need preclinical companies in IPO. You're absolutely right. But in terms of what we see in early stage, and one thing that you mentioned, Michal, and something that you mentioned, Kate, is the bar getting higher, and certainly in terms of maturation of these technologies in IO, that has been happening, right? And so when you have an incumbent in a clinic with a lot of data, let's say you've got a LAG-3, but then another company comes in with another checkpoint inhibitor, BTLA4, TIM3, Vista. The traditional investors, institutional investors, corporate investors are going to be like, well, what's the differentiation point, right? What's the differentiation point between this and that? How many oncolytic viruses out there, right? And which oncolytic virus is going to be actually better than the other? Do we know, right? We only know if we have the data. The only way you're going to get the data is if you do some of those critical killer experiments, preferably in the academic setting, to increase the valuation, but then also set the mind straight with corporate investors to make them feel that this is the better target to go after. I think that's incredibly important. Having said that, there are still, we work with a lot of early stage investors, which we call emerging managers. They're all within that kind of space of $250 to $2 million range. They're maintaining that valuation. Well, the valuations are slightly decreased because of what happened in 2021, but they are still working in early stage investing, and in some cases immuno-oncology. So Boehringer Ingelheim Ventures comes to mind in terms of early stage and in immuno-oncology. I don't want to name others. We work with a lot of others. But, in terms of other areas of early stage, crowdfunding approaches is there. SEC regulations have changed to up to 5 million in a 12-month period. So that is a potential. It does have some downsides, and there's also a lot of initiatives aligned up by NIH and at Kuldeep. You probably know all about these. The REACH initiative, Research Evaluation Commercialization Hubs, which stimulate a lot of early stage technologies within academia to get to a de-risking point, which can then be of interest to corporate VCs or traditional VCs. But yeah, the markets have been impacted, and this is probably going on to the next set of discussion points we could potentially have. But yeah, Andrew, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, I can't say more than what you said. I think you were, without going further into this and being more passionate about it, I think you hit it.
Well, I have to be careful what I say because this is being recorded. But one thing I glossed over, and I meant to go back to something that Kuldeep had mentioned about how a lot of this research, unfortunately, within particularly that which is sponsored research, is in many ways being that research is being done in isolation. And I agree with you, Kuldeep, that is inappropriate. And that's maybe not even strong enough to say that we see ourselves as a bridge to that innovation, bringing children's hospitals like Texas Children's together with Boston Children's to collaborate on certain indications. We feel that collaboration, bringing that best in talent, best in mind together is critical because I know that many people in Cambridge feels like the sun and moon rises on the Charles, but we actually believe that, there's great innovation in other places in the country, and bringing that collaboration together. SVB is an example of that. Catherine Anderson has played a seminal role in bringing many people together as well. I think those collaborations are absolutely essential. And I'll be honest with you, the venture community has done a very, very poor job of doing that. And I think it's now, critical for us to stand up and be counted for in helping that collaboration.
Yeah, Sorry, Andrew, that's such an important point. And, Erica will attest to this, data analytics and how it's been pursued in J&J and Janssen Oncology, cannot happen until you bring, multidisciplinary approaches to really understanding what is the patient that truly has the unmet clinical need that can be targeted with a very innovative medicine. You cannot do that in isolation. And yes, you have the flagships and the atlases who bring that sort of umbrella of technology platforms and tries to integrate them. But we cannot exclude, I think, the academic, institutes where this research is being done, but we have to come up with mechanisms of really funding them. It is the isolation is a big deal. Sorry, Anton, you were saying.
Oh, just one point to Andrew in terms of the sun rising and setting on the Charles River. The VCs we work with a lot of VCs, and we see a lot of VCs working outside of the hubs. So outside of South San Francisco, outside of Boston, because there is a lot of technology there, which is undervalued. And we're seeing a lot of VCs working in Europe. With lower valuations in those regions as well. So we are seeing movement of VCs outside of the hubs because of the inflated bubble that is. But that will be corrected over time.
And we see global pharmaceutical companies working across the globe.
Exactly.
Maybe I'll turn back to Meredith.
Just as a case in point, I mean, our LPs required us to have an office in Chicago. So I actually commute from Boston to Chicago every other week, so that we would be able to gain access to, other facilities. I remember when I would first move to Boston and I did research at the Cleveland Clinic, and somebody at MGH said to me, "Oh, that's a nice hospital." It's interesting when we think about that global approach. I will say one thing, to give props to both Johnson & Johnson and a few other different organizations. We have been really impressed with the amount of corporate collaboration that we've experienced, not just on the corporate venture side, but also, for example, your group, Michal, and the work that you've been doing at JDDC. I mean, it has really served as an impetus. I mean, we can invest all we want in early stage venture and early stage innovation, but if the manufacturers don't step up and say, "Oh, we want to put this in house and help with the biomanufacturing, sales, and distribution," things go nowhere. So, I mean, I have to, give Johnson & Johnson its props along with others that have really stepped up and carried that flag.
Andrew, so that's actually a great point. And even in the last couple of minutes here, instead of trying to do a roundtable, I'll maybe tee this up as a little bit of a free for all, whoever gets off mute first. But I think, we talked about VC, we talked about valuation, we talked about pouring money, into some areas and not others, and how that's, going to wreak some havoc to some extent on, let's say, the venture community and the returns. But, there are other routes for capital, a la M&A transactions, right? And business development and partnerships. So maybe we could spend the last few moments talking about the role for those moving forward and how people are thinking about them coming up in 22 and beyond. If it turns out now that valuations are either down, companies are trading below cash, but there's still some really good companies out there. What's BD going to look like coming through here, in the next year for these companies in this space? First person off mute. Right.
No, I mean, I think that, the business development environment, really, in my opinion, has been evolving over time. I mean, the role that large cap pharma plays, I think, has moved away from being the impetus for innovation, but rather being the graduation of that innovation to the next level. I mean, I after investment banking, I was head of M&A for Baxter Corporation. And, for us, it was made very clear to me on day one that, over 40% of our revenue had to come from products that were currently not in our pipeline today. And that, I think, is a trend that is going to continue. I mean, as a venture investor, when we see a strategic partner with us in a syndicate, we're like, because it really defines an alternative pathway for the evolution of this product. I mean, if we want to put it in gross terms, the exit or the transition of ownership of that. And, what we're concerned with and what we're focused on, just HIC now, is how something gets to market, the commercialization of that innovation. And we believe that a strategic partner plays a seminal role in that. And having them in the process early is invaluable. They help us think through manufacturing, distribution, commercialization, reimbursement, just to name a few. That's why, I was giving props to J&J before, because we're very fortunate to look at some things alongside with them and with the venture arm of with Johnson & Johnson, as well as others. And, I think it's great. I also think that, the work coming out of Dana-Farber and MGH and the venture funds out of these centers of excellence has played a seminal role. When I joined Chris Coburn, when he was at Cleveland Clinic Foundation, that was a team of 3 people. And I was person number 3. I am that old, actually. Cosmetics do a great job for me. And the thing is that what's interesting is that Johnson, the teams at Dana-Farber, at MGH, what have you, are exponentially larger now. And I am thrilled that has happened. So.
Yeah, I think M&A is really going to be pivotal now, right? Pfizer just bought New Haven, right? Biohaven, and non-oncology, but certainly pain in the pain area, and how they're going to broaden their therapeutic base. But this is so crucial for this industry, and I think this is the optimum time, right? Companies are undervalued. And I think the good ones are going to be targets, and they're going to be targets by companies like Pfizer, who have a huge cash, right? Surplus, thanks to the pandemic. So J&J is probably looking very busy in that space as well, like other big pharma. So this hopefully will turn around the downtrend right now. But M&A is such a crucial part of what I think what's going to happen in the next year or so.
Yeah, it looks like we are amazingly out of time. This was a truly exciting discussion. Before we depart, though, we'll take maybe 1 minute to revisit some of the members of the panel who are on the matrix who didn't have a chance to chime in on this last point. Maybe I'll ask you, Ryan, Kate, and Erica, to just share a final thought. Doesn't have to be on this last point, and then we'll wrap up.
Sure, I can just add quickly that it's something that certainly the markets have changed substantially, and so I won't speak to the M&A part of it. I'll leave that to others. But just speaking to the change in markets over the last year and a half, what we've really noticed is that companies are more likely to get stalled out in between an A and a B round sometimes as they're going into the clinic, and things are getting stalled before they go into the clinic. You're speaking to overvaluing preclinical assets. I think that was happening, and now that's not happening, and so they're having a hard time raising the money they need to get into the clinic because those B rounds are getting stalled out. And so we don't know what to do about that yet, but we definitely noticed that. And as a foundation who makes investments, we do look for ways to be impactful there, but we also look to make sure we try to get a return on our investments. So it's a very complicated area to kind of wade into these days, but certainly something we've been paying a lot of attention to lately.
Yeah. Thank you, Ryan. Kate, any topic, it doesn't have to be on this one. What are you optimistic about, just in the last 30 seconds?
Sure. I think I'm optimistic. One of the questions that the moderators had posed to us in advance was, is the field maturing? And I think, there's a couple ways to answer that. But one of the responses that I sort of thought about was I looked around at the companies and investors that are focused in IO, and I feel like it still feels like there's fertile ground. From the perspective of Dana-Farber, we run, tons of immuno-oncology trials every year, but we're also still regularly being approached by both pharma as well as other funding sources and strategic partners who want to both fund and collaborate around early stage research in this area. So it feels like there's still more to be done before we fully saturated the field. So I think when I hear that, and reflect on what we're seeing, we're not there yet, and there's still a lot of exciting opportunity to go.
Okay, thank you. And Erica, you get the final word.
No, this is truly an exciting area to be a part of, and I'm so thankful to be a part of J&J and J&J Innovation. As we think about new ideas about how to support and cultivate the relationships with these early innovators. For instance, I want to call out J Labs, which is our global network of incubators that really allow for these early stage innovators to feel supported by J&J and to really potentially get a leg up as they're looking for additional funding and looking to propel their science forward. And as was referenced earlier, JJDC, our strategic arm, really trying to craft out and draft out very unique, deal structures, that would be beneficial not only to these early investors, but also to J&J, that is driven by our internal, priorities that are always scientific in nature. So really exciting, what's going on in this field, and excited to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. So with that, I would like to thank Meredith, my co-moderator. Thank you, Anton, Andrew, Ryan, Kate, Erica, and Kuldeep for being here, and all of you in the audience who joined us today to talk about this important topic that will, all that early innovation that will feed the future pipelines and come to patients to help relieve them of the terrible disease called cancer. So thanks everyone, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.